Hey, thanks a lot for coming out. As they mentioned, I'm a little bit under the weather, but as Oscar Wilde once said, only the mediocre man is always at his best. But it's also actually a very wonderful, special day for me, even though you wouldn't think it from looking at how young I look. As of about 1 o'clock this morning, I became a grandfather. So, pretty wonderful day for me. So I'm here to talk about Web 2.0 5 years on. You know, I want to remind everybody from the outset, Web 2.0 was never intended to be a version number. It was really a reflection on what happened after the dot-com bust. You know, there were some companies, some projects that seemed to survive when others were flattened. What was it? Why was it? And it was reflecting on that led us to tell a big story. And the big story was that the companies that survived had learned how to use the web as a platform. And in particular, they understood that the heart of that was to harness collective intelligence. That is, to get their users to add value to what they were doing. So, I want to reflect on the question that people have asked me ever since we did that first Web 2.0 conference. They would say, what's next? What's Web 3.0? Right? And they say, well, is it the semantic web? Is it virtual reality? Is it the social web? Is it the mobile web? And I think it's all of these things. But I think it's more than that. And I think it's really important that we understand just what it is that is coming our way. Right? And in order to talk about that, I want to start, perhaps for obvious reasons, this is on my mind, but with a baby. That's my daughter 30 years ago. And, you know, a newborn baby sees, it hears, it feels, but it can't quite make sense of all those sensations. Gradually, they start to make sense. But even after a few months, that baby is always putting things in its mouth, trying to say, what is this? Because they can't quite coordinate the data from all their senses. But eventually, they grow up a little bit, they learn to have fun, and they play. And then eventually, they grow up the rest of the way and they go to work. So my daughter now works for our craft magazine. There's a list of some articles she's written. So, if we think the same way of the web as a newborn baby, and in particular as Web 2.0 as the maturation of that baby, we have to ask ourselves, is the web getting any smarter? In order to answer that question, I took a look back at the history of search engines. I went and found this wonderful page from Brian Pinkerton's web crawler. Back in 1994, Brian launched the first web search engine, did the first crawl of the web. And on this page from March of 1994, he crawled all of 5,900 sites. And he found 2,000 of them were using HTTP. Pretty amazing moment, right? And he returned a list of the top 25 sites that he had found. Now, we came a long way. This is the stage when search engines just stuck everything in their mouth and said, what is this thing? And in 1998, when this site was launched, here's an image courtesy of that wonderful Internet Archive. Google was indexing 25 million pages. The baby was definitely getting more complex. But more to the point, Google figured out a way to extract additional meaning from those pages by studying the link structure of the web. And of course, last year Google announced that it hit 1 trillion pages. But more to the point, if you look at the latest generation of search applications like the Google mobile app, we start to see something profoundly new. How many people here have actually tried this application? Okay, you really should. If you have an iPhone, try it out, because it really is quite remarkable. You know, it's really hand-eye coordination, if you like. You pick up the phone, put it to your ear, the motion sensor and the proximity sensor notices the move and puts it into listening mode. The microphone then hears what you say. The speech recognition is actually improved by cross-tabulation with the database of intentions, as John Battelle so famously called the Google search index. right? They're able to extract more meaning from the text. Meanwhile, then, the location sensor in the phone reports in. And your result? You don't get the Wikipedia entry on pizza. You get the 3 closest pizza places. You know, this is clearly a revolution in search that's analogous to the kind of change that happens as that baby learns to coordinate input from all its senses and do new things with them. Of course, this has led to an April Fool's joke this morning, this idea of sensor-based interfaces, where the Opera web browser claimed that they had launched a platform for face recognition, and you could control the browser by making faces at it. It was quite credible. I mean, I tweeted it and watched it be retweeted across the web, and I felt so guilty that I immediately followed up with a tweet saying, hey, that was an April Fool's joke. But it is in fact credible. And you see this if you've looked at this application for the G-phone, Wikitude. This is an application. You point your phone at, say, a historical object, like if you're a tourist, and it pulls up Wikipedia information for what it is recognizing. The computer is actually able to recognize and interpret what it sees. Or you look at other applications where you can scan a barcode or other information and actually get results. In fact, there was an application just released called Bar Tour, in which you can scan a barcode with your cell phone camera and actually trigger a torrent download on your PC. So we're starting to see the coordination of these electronic senses. That's the wave of the future. Now, the wonderful concept I got just recently at our eTech conference, Mike Kuniavsky of ThingM gave a wonderful talk where he talked about information shadows. And if you look at something like, say, a book, I put up a book that we did called Programming Collective Intelligence, and it's got information shadows on O'Reilly.com, on Amazon, on our Safari Books Online, in Google, in Goodreads, and all the sites like that. All through the web, there are information shadows. And they're tied together by a unique identifier, the ISBN. Now, we have other examples where we cast information shadows on the web, and there is no global identifier. But that doesn't mean that we can't actually recognize and aggregate and coordinate that information. Now clearly, if you have a namespace, it helps. So tim@O'Reilly.com or @TimO'Reilly. These are simple, memorable namespaces that have really taken off. If you look by contrast at the Facebook URL, I think they missed a trick there. And, so definitely having a meaningful namespace is a very powerful tool. And as you're designing an application, think about that. Now, of course, Twitter had the great luck that they didn't invent that namespace, the users did. And, or made it more useful. But I'm not really worried about identity and social networks long term. And I'll tell you why. In 1994, I published this book. We refer to it as the Rabbit Book. And it was a directory of something like 140 different incompatible email networks. None of them worked together. And this was the secret tips and tricks of how you gatewayed from one to the other. A little bit like social network hell today. Right? But the fact is, we did in fact standardize on a single social network, a single email format. We got rid of the history. This book is now long gone. But more than that, though, I think there's a really important concept. And that is that meaning doesn't have to be formalized. It can be statistically extracted. There are all kinds of interesting machine learning techniques. And a great example of this is the CDDB database. You guys think about what happens when you put a CD into your computer, right? Turns out that the software there recognizes the checksum of the lengths of the songs on that CD. And it was then able to map that to this namespace of albums, artists, songs, with a directory lookup. And I think there's an important point there, and I want you to think about this because I'm going to show you some things that are going to blow your mind. This is a story that I heard again just last week at our Emerging Technology Conference. Amy, company that O'Reilly Alphatech Ventures has invested in the UK, is working on a project to aggregate sensor data, including smart electrical meters from the smart grid. They have 1.2 million homes, instrumented this way in the UK. And one of the things they noticed is that the energy signature of major appliances is so unique that from the spike of power that shows up when your refrigerator motor goes on, you can identify the make and the model. And of course, this application that they're working on actually then says, hey, you could actually buy another model that will save you energy. But the point is, there's meaning hidden in all this sensor data that is starting to be gathered. So on this theme of the web growing smarter, we're adding all of these sensors to it. It's no longer going to be driven by people typing on keyboards. And the task of extracting meaning from that data is going to open up incredibly powerful new applications that we haven't fully dreamed of yet. So, we see hints of this with something like Google Flu Trends, search traffic, able to predict where the flu is taking hold. This really, actually, with regard to the flu, even the process by which they try to predict and make the flu vaccine each year is done by a study that they call antigenic cartography. They actually look at the genetic drift of the flu viruses through various sampling, and they use machine learning to try to guess which way it's going to drift in the coming year. And so the baby that we built with technology is growing up. It's starting to go to work. We're getting beyond the world in which it's just for fun. The web, Facebook, the iPhone, it's just cool and fun. It's really starting to go to work. And so when you see kind of a toy application like Botanicals, Katie London's NYU project in which you can set up a plant so that it will Twitter you or phone you when it needs to be watered. And then you draw the line between there and the recent initiatives announced by Cisco, where they're saying they're going to work with NASA to build a sensor-based planetary skin. And you see IBM with one of their major initiatives being a smarter planet, will be instrumented, interconnected, intelligent. You see, this is the direction that we're going in. These applications that we build are increasingly going to be driven by sensors. Pay attention. And this really leads to a formulation that John Battelle and I have been playing with, which is, this is really John's idea. I think it's a really interesting frame, really kind of moving beyond the idea of Web 2.0 to this idea as it really engages with the world, it really becomes something profoundly different. We're calling it Web squared, just a mnemonic. And this really came to play. You can see this in the election of Barack Obama. The way that he used technology to transform politics, the way that he harnessed his audience to do something that was profoundly, world-shaping. History's on a different course because of somebody understanding how to apply technology more effectively in a new realm. And that leads me, though, to a reflection on the theme of this particular event this year. We thought, because of the downturn, because all of us are faced with the idea that maybe, these ideas of perpetual increase were going to be a problem, that we might have to do more with less. We actually said, well, let's think about what does it mean? And maybe there's actually power in less. And that is one of the lessons of the web. Right? Because in the technology industry, we take for granted that we get more each year for less. But it doesn't work that way in the world. If you think about the whole basis of our economy is that more will be spent, that things will be bigger and cost more. The economy will grow. And yet in technology, we have this wonderful power of less, where we get more for the same amount. And I think we need to start thinking about how do we apply Moore's law to the world's great problems. So let me give you a couple of examples. This area of the smart grid. They're trying to figure out how can we apply internet-like intelligence techniques, connecting sensors in homes, in factories, and out in the world to actually build a smart grid. In the same way that the internet is a much smarter system than the old telephone system. We literally have the same kind of energy grid that was built in the 19th century. We haven't updated at all. About time we do. Similarly, here's another example. I've been spending a lot of time in Washington. And the thing you see so often is how expensive government programs are. And so I was really heartened when I saw this site, usaspending.gov. It's a site for tracking down to quite a lot of detail the spending on federal programs. Well, guess how much this site cost the federal government? It cost them only a couple $100,000. Guess why? Because actually, it was a clone of a site that had been started by a nonprofit called OMB Watch with funding by the Sunlight Foundation. They spent $350,000 to build this site. And the federal government said, why do we have to do it over? Maybe we could just license their code. And I think that really inspired me. This kind of story is what inspired me to launch a new event with TechWeb called the Gov2O Summit, because we are trying to bring that kind of innovation from Silicon Valley to government. We want them to understand that a lot of the services that they need to build don't have to cost $50 million and take 5 years. That there are things that we know how to do that can be done in weeks or months for a fraction of the cost. And that frees up money to tackle the stuff that's still really hard. And I really want to challenge all of you to join me in trying to make a difference with our government. I think we have about 2 years in which the Obama administration is still fresh. They still have a lot of ideas about how they want to change government. There's receptivity, and we can make a difference. And I really like, regardless of your politics, I think we all could go there and really try to make a difference with technology. But I also want to point out another site. This is something called Patients Like Me. On the surface, it's a social network for people with life-changing diseases. That's pretty cool just by itself. But what's more important about Patients Like Me is it's actually also the world's largest clinical trial and post-clinical trial. Because what they figured out is that the power of the internet and social media and user self-service allows people to report on their results from every treatment that they're taking. So people with multiple sclerosis can report, did this medicine help me? It's the largest trial anywhere, and something that will cost a drug company tens of millions of dollars is being done by the people themselves. And that's part of the power that we have, to take these techniques that we've developed on the consumer internet and start to apply them to big, hard problems. Now, in that, I think we really also have to take the lesson from the most successful systems that our community has created. The most successful, complex, amazingly complex systems like the web actually start very small, very simple. So part of the power of less is to build a simple system and then let it evolve. The IBM PC was like that. They didn't do everything. Value was left for the ecosystem to add. Similarly, when Tim Berners-Lee created the first web browser, the first web server, he put it in the public domain. He allowed others to add to what he was doing. And the real core was the protocol that tied everything together. And of course, more recently, we have Twitter, an incredibly simple application that has led to all kinds of innovation as people rushed in to do all the things that Twitter themselves had not done. And that kind of leads me really to a maxim that I've been trying to put out there for everybody in our community, which is to pay attention to this idea that we need to create more value than we capture. We have some counterexamples. Our financial system. There were a whole lot of people who said, wow, I can get a lot for myself here. And the financial system is really a tale of how collective intelligence can go awry. Because, of course, our financial system is also network collective intelligence, and yet it was somehow hijacked by the spammers, the Ponzi schemers, and the people who thought, I want to get something for me. We know what happened. That's the fail whale. Okay? But by contrast, I think what we in the technology community know and what we've learned is that by working together, by figuring out how what we build can be a creator of value for others through the creation of an ecosystem, we can build what Anish Chopra, who's the Secretary of Technology for the Commonwealth of Virginia, refers to as the digital Commonwealth. You know, he had this wonderful phrasing. He said, when I came to Virginia, I came to realize why they don't call it a state. They call it a commonwealth, because it's something that we create together. And I think we in the web community know that. We know that this wonderful flowering of innovation is something that we have created together. And I want you all to take that as your mission, to continue to create, to invent, and to make value for this challenged world of ours. Thank you very much.